Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Leadership Void podcast. I'm Enrique with my co-host Vince to bring you the best in our veteran, military spouse, and first responder community. And Vince will introduce today's guest.
Oh, I'm excited. First, let me say it's going to be National First Responder Day on October 28th. And we have Mike Johansmeyer, who is a fire chief from the City of Lake Mary Fire Department. Welcome, Mike, to the show. Please tell us about you.
Well, thank you so much for the invite, Vince and Enrique. It's a pleasure being on here. It's pretty cool. This is my first podcast, so I hope I do a good job here. So a little bit about me. I've been married for 27 years, high school sweethearts right out of the city of Lake Mary High School. So I grew up in the area that I'm serving now since I was a little kid, all the way back to about 76. I have two children. One's 27, a son, and a daughter who's 26. And I have two grandchildren, 14 months and 5 months, which have been, the joy of life. I understand when grandparents are talking now about, it's all about the grandkids. So they definitely take a lot of our time, and we sure do love them. So it's been great. We're a typical family here in Florida. We like boating and outside and that kind of thing. And we do a lot of, we're a scuba diving family and just do a lot of stuff that's, outside of the home. So we have a pretty good time. I've been in the service. So, let me back up. I started with, when I was in high school, we had a work program here, and I started with having to do something that would get me out of having to go to class all the time. So, as a teenager, I was like, I just want to get out of class. So I went to the guidance counselor, and they're like, hey, they got a work program, you get credit for that. So I wound up managing a pharmacy and called a compounding pharmacy, where you made things up from scratch. So I'd make 1,200 capsules a day, or gummy bears for kids, suppositories, everything you could imagine. And I had a great time doing that, but it also gave me a fantastic foundation of moving into. I knew I wanted to be a paramedic and get into the fire department. And so in 1994, Altamont Springs Fire Department gave me the opportunity to become a part-timer there. Shortly, that was in June. In October, Seminole County Fire Department picked me up, and I was there for just over 27 and a half years until just 6 months ago. It's almost my anniversary, just past my anniversary here, to the city of Lake Mary as the fire chief. So I've had a really pretty cool career. I think it's been a very unique career, even as fire service goes. I've been in charge of a helicopter program that had a Huey. And we would transport patients with Hueys and use a thing they called a Bambi bucket to put out fires. I've been on the Florida Task Force 4 Urban Search and Rescue Team. Those are the teams that you see even here just recently with Hurricane Ian, where these teams go out in the worst of the worst and, locate and life safety and try to make sure everybody's accounted for and so forth. And I've had some pretty cool deployments on that, even as far as Texas. So it's been pretty cool. And then from an academic standpoint, I've had some really unique opportunities there too. I'm what they call a Chief Fire Officer designation through the Center for Public Safety and Excellence, where they credential you based on what your experience and what you've done. I've got my 4-year degree from the University of Central Florida, but most uniquely from the fire service standpoint, I'm a graduate of the Naval Postgraduate Academy out of California for Center for Homeland Defense and Securities, with a master's degree from there, which is probably one of the most unique things I can say from a fire department perspective on something that I was afforded the opportunity to do, and so honored to be able to go to that prestigious school. So, and it taught me quite a bit about everything, including myself. So it was a good thing. I think that's about it for, just about me, but it's been a good ride.
An amazing journey. Not many people get the diversity that we hear you had, even from an opportunity to get out of class.
Sure.
But dive into something like pharmaceuticals was a great way to get you into paramedics. You have to know about those things, right? Maybe not the compound, but the use, right, and what it's for. And just nice to see that you are now serving at the head of the fire department for your town. Not many people get to come back home, right, and give back. So kudos to you and your journey. The Naval Postgraduate School. Well, you just became my best friend. Vince knows it. I served in the Navy and know MPS very
cool.
well. But you know, your trajectory led you to this position. Now tell us about the Lake Mary Fire Department.
So where I was from, Seminole County is the county the city of Lake Mary is within. So I've been serving Lake Mary even since the very beginning days of getting into the fire department. What we have here specifically is what we call a first response agreement. So when you call 911 in Seminole County, any one of the fire departments that's located in Seminole County may show up to your door. It's going to be the closest one. Doesn't care what color the fire truck is, or the uniform, or what the patch says on it. You're going to get the same care. We operate under the same guidelines for what we call medical direction, and or if you had a fire, we operate under the same SOGs for dealing with a fire. So this morning I just came out of Florida, came out of one of the fire chief meetings where all of the fire chiefs in Seminole County meet. So being that as a shift commander, a battalion chief, a lieutenant on the truck, I've always been running or interacted with the city of Lake Mary. So it wasn't a really big transition coming here. And then I taught at Seminole State College, which does our EMT, paramedics, and what we call fire standards. I taught there for 20 years. So coming in here, I already knew most of the people. There might have been a few that I didn't really know, but most of them, I not only did I know them by first name, you know, I knew them from years of history. So the city of Lake Mary Fire Department, we're right at 10 square miles. We're about $6.2 million budget. And we have 2 fire engines, 2 rescue trucks that run first line. We are fixing to get what we call a Quint, which is basically a little bit bigger fire truck, and it has a 75-foot ladder on it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. But that's coming in. Actually, it's going to be here for our open house on November 12th, and then it's still got to get a little bit more work done, but it's a brand new truck. It's the first time the city of Lake Mary's had a Quint or tower truck put in service, so it's going to be a big deal for us. We have 50 people. Basically we're split up the same way any other fire department is. We have an administrative side of the business, HR, budget, you know, purchasing, support services, and then we have an operations side of the budget, which is wheels on the ground, boots on the ground, get the job done, and that's why we're all here. And you know, I view myself as the first in line for serving and supporting the firefighters. I could not come to work today, right? Nothing's going to change on whether the fire truck goes out the door or not. And that's what's so great about first response and first responders is, you know, if you're in a fire truck or you're in a police car or what have you, those are really the people that we're all here to serve. And it doesn't matter what part of the organization you're in, that's what's the most critical role.
I definitely love it. And kudos to you all, and happy National First Responder Day coming up. Honestly, you know, without you, some of us wouldn't be having our house, our health, or our lives. So it's a great representation of someone that has been all about service before self. One of the second core value of the Air Force as well, by the way.
Oh, so, really?
Yeah.
Very good. I didn't know that.
Roger. So thank you for that. So you spoke about Hurricane Ian. So, or we'd like to hear about either lessons learned from that or the post-pandemic, what that influenced or impacted the fire department.
Yeah, so both of those events, one a little shorter than the other, right? When you're talking about 2 or 3 days for the hurricane or 2 or 3 years for COVID, but you know, even with COVID, it's not going away; it's here forever, right? So you know, I thought about some of those things as I go through. When I start looking backwards and seeing, hey, what is so different today and what have you, and both of these events have created a very significant piece that I learned in the Naval Postgraduate School is where, you know, most of the time we're talking about policy and we're trying to have rules and regulations, SOGs, guidelines, however you want to look at that. And then every once in a while you have this thing that doesn't fit. It's a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't fit. And at the Naval Postgraduate School, they called that, you know, basically a black swan, several different opportunities there on how you could identify that being different than what you're normally used to. But what was most important is that if you were to be going through a tunnel in your car, that tunnel is normal policy and all. when you start going to like a Hurricane Ian and the flooding that we received here in Seminole County, which was a 100-year flood, or you're dealing with something like COVID-19, it doesn't fit in the tunnel anymore. Now you have to go above the tunnel and make the tunnel taller. And now you have to revise your policies to meet those requirements, because once you've dealt with it once, the citizenry and it is that's the way it should be. They're not going to allow you to get through something again with already having the lesson and experience learned the first time. Which brings me to the second part of this, is that all fire departments and public safety across this nation, and I would guess across the world, that experience has been a big challenge for us, because we have attrition going on right now that is unprecedented as well. So we were sitting in emergency management here in what we would call our EOC, Emergency Operations Center, during Hurricane Ian. And out of everybody that was in that room for the entire city of Lake Mary, which all of them become first responders during a hurricane, right? They have specific roles that they have to get accomplished, whether it's opening up roads or making sure that the power line doesn't hurt anybody. Everybody in that room, there was about 3 people that had been in their previous role, in their current role previously during another major event. The other 40 or so of us were in new roles. Now, did we bring experiences from our previous life or our previous role? Absolutely. But you still are not a team, right? You're not gelling as a team. You're having to work through all of those processes. And that's the worst time to do it, is when you're in a critical emergency and, the action items are pouring in and you're just, you get overwhelmed. But I'm very proud of the city of Lake Mary on how we performed. The emergency management EOC falls under the fire chief's office. So we housed all of the operations going on within the city of Lake Mary. And our mayor, our commissioners, the city manager, who I report to directly, the support that we received from them were second to none. I didn't have to even ask a second time. Whatever we asked for, we got. And then the resiliency afterwards, once the storm is over, getting out there and returning to normal life. The community I'm with it's a somewhat of an affluent community. And the expectation is life goes on and we get back to normal. And that's what we wound up doing, very quickly. By Friday afternoon, we had a lot back into normalcy. Most of the roads had been cleared or at least opened. And then by Monday the following week, all the power was back on. So we were very, very, very fortunate not to get like our brothers and sisters got down further south, for sure. That hurricane took a quick right, and it was significant help for us when it did early in the morning hours of Wednesday night, I believe it was.
And it's amazing how chaos will give you opportunities to see how well your team will gel.
Sure.
It's usually during that time where you see there's a good chance that we'll make it or not. And I'm so glad to hear that you guys were on the positive side of that scenario. And you earlier you talked about, hey, we're gonna get this new truck into our system, first time in Lake Mary. So tell us a little bit about what the horizon looks like for the City of Lake Mary Fire Department.
So when I got here, the previous fire chief was in transition. He knew he was leaving, and they were coming up on their strategic plan being due again. And so when I came here, it was really pretty cool that I got to start a brand new strategic plan as a brand new fire chief, and several promotions had taken place too at the time. So we went through quite a bit of attrition here while I've been in office. And it's been fantastic, because I've been able to promote people from within the department versus going outside. So that's been a significant help for a leader to be able to come into a department and not just take it over and or change it dramatically outside of what has to be done. So the seats have to be filled. So as we were going through all of that, what I found was that we were doing some unique things here, and I identified some of the things that I had from my previous organization. So it's really pretty simple where we're headed right now. What I would call a 5-star program. So we have fire accreditation right now, and fire accreditation is really an accreditation that's based on quality improvement. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, you just write it down and then you let them know what you're going to do to make it better. And so for us, something like a response time, we want to have like 5-minute response times, and that's a much deeper conversation than just that. But let's say that we're at 7 minutes and we want a 5-minute. So the next thing that we're going to do is get it to 6 minutes. And the next thing we would do is get it to 5 minutes. Something as simple as that. And some of them we might be meeting exactly what our goal is, but we want to get better. And we're constantly moving the needle down the road, kicking the can, however you want to put it. So that's one. The second one is what we would call a CAS accreditation, and that's an ambulance accreditation. We don't have that yet, but we're going to. It's very big on clinical efficiencies and proficiencies and making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing there, which I have I totally believe that we're doing everything we need to be doing, but we need to benchmark ourselves against a standard. And this is the standard for transporting patients within a fire department organization. And so that reduces quite a bit of risk and liability on the organization, because it really goes through, it's more of a checkbox. Either you do it or you don't. If you don't do it, you're not going to get accredited. So it kind of makes it more straight line. The same thing goes on with what we call an ISO. So we're an ISO 2 right now rating, and we're trying to get to an ISO 1, and that is the performance of the fire department. And that really is revolved around fires. And so what do you do with fires and prevent fires? And so we're working towards that, and we do an incredible job of fire prevention, not actually having fires. And there's a lot of credit to be gained by that, because the prevention part is what we really want. Yeah, we can get there quick and we can put the fire out, but it would be surely nice to just eliminate the fire to begin with. And let's make sure that, we don't have lives and property at stake. So we're headed towards that. And I think we'll have that within the next, year or so. I put it out a little further than that just because I didn't know at the time of the strategic plan, just, exactly what I'd be dealing with. But I think we're going to more than reach our goal. We're going to get it done much quicker than we thought we were going to. And then EM emergency management accreditation, it's the same kind of thing. It's just basically going through, what have you done? What's the experiences of the personnel, going through all that. But most importantly, what I'm so proud of here at Lake Mary is I recognize that we now I get to say they have it already done before I got here. And I was like, well, we are doing some things here that are very unique for fire departments. And so just a few of them is, we do 100% of our life safety inspections. You would think everybody would be doing that, but staffing doesn't necessarily allow that to happen. 100% for pre-fire plans, 75% paramedics within the department. That is a huge one, because it's very hard to hire paramedics right now. There's a national shortage on paramedics. 100% of our employees are trained in AED, CPR, and stop the bleed, tourniquet training. That's significant. Plus, we have a lot of the stations throughout the city, so that if you needed an AED, you can pull an AED off of a wall and utilize it in that case of somebody having a heart attack. And then maintaining a strategic plan and keeping that up to date. There's about 7 or 8 other items that fall under Champions for Life, is what we're calling it. And we have those all outlined. Those are the main big ones that are really something that we're really proud of. So it's been pretty cool to be here in a department that I've known for so many years, but really get to know them. And kind of a little bit of a motto here is, we're big enough to serve you, but small enough to know you. And it has been really pretty cool, moving from a big metro-sized fire department of 500 people to 50 people. And see the difference with that, with your customer. We have direct link to our customer all the time, as a whole organization, not just one fire station or one shift. We do it. We have a better opportunity to reach the citizen.
Kudos on all the accreditations and, the holistic fire personnel. It seems like it's evident on the leadership that is manifested through you and other leaders in Lake Mary. So kudos to your leadership. So let's transition and talk a little bit about that, Mike. What do you do in your spare time that aids you to thrive in your professional life?
Well, I make a mean old fashioned, so we can start with that. But more on a serious side, I think is, work-life balance is so important. And right now, one of the critical things in public safety is PTSD, suicide. Suicide is the #1 reason why firefighters die in the state of Florida. And most people don't realize that. It used to be heart attacks and cardiac, but it has moved into the unfortunate thing where somebody believes they don't have anything, any other opportunities to turn to, and they take their own life. And that's the worst thing in the world, especially for somebody who, I mean, it's bad no matter what. I understand, but when you're talking about somebody who's given their life to serving, that's the last person we want to think was helpless in getting something done and get them back on the track. So there's been a lot of work done with that. But to my point, the work-life balance, I think, is so critically important. And that means it's more than just understanding that you need a work-life balance. It means keeping things in check, making sure things are taken care of before they get out of check, and not committing to. Most of us are servants. We're public servants, so naturally we are going to serve, and that's going to take the bigger piece of the pie from everything else in your life. And the next thing you got 75% of your concern and what you're doing is your motivation is at work. And then you wonder why your home life's getting a little bit off of the tracks. It doesn't work either way. You gotta split it down the middle. And yeah, some weeks the work might take the energy, but next week it might be the opposite. And you got to make sure that you're committing to both sides of it equally. And that's one of the ones where you just got to stop every once in a while and take a deep breath and see it from, whether it's your wife, your significant other, your loved one, your mom and dad, whoever it is, your kids. You got to kind of look at it from their point of view and say, what are they expecting from you? And what they're expecting is for you to be present. And a lot of times we're not. So I think that that's, now that I'm getting older in life, I think that I wish I knew that a little bit better 10 years ago or so, that you got to have that balance. And you know what, we're all running the same race. And even the ones that get it under control, they're going to be just as successful as you are. So it isn't just about, pounding out the work. It's a lot bigger and deeper than that.
And we agree, it is you bring up that situation of those that are in service often don't get the service, right? And they feel that they're not getting the service. So our heart goes out to all those that are and have experienced this tragedy in their life. But you mentioned something there about knowing, and that's a great advice. Know yourself, know your limitations, know your surroundings, know who you have to pull from. And undoubtedly you've learned a lot of great things throughout your trajectory in the fire department, through paramedics and all of that. And what would be one advice that you would give, or advices that you would give that you've received that have lasted you this long?
I've got a few for that. Number one is, be around the people that you want to be. There's nothing bigger than birds of a feather fly together. And if you're around people that are negative and, not wanting to get to the next step in their life, or, just a total train wreck in everything that they're doing, it's going to rub off on you. But if you have those people that, maybe they yell at you every once in a while, maybe they correct you and criticize you every once in a while, and it's a little uncomfortable. Overall, you need to be around those people that, you respect and are big leaders in their own right and where you want to get to. And or maybe it's just that they do a really great job with their family and I want to be a better family man. Whatever that is, you need to get into those relationships. And those should be long-time relationships. I think one of the biggest benefits I have is when I start talking about best friends, most people will say they have maybe one or two, and then the rest of them are friends. I could honestly say I could probably name out 10 best friends right now that if I needed anything, I could pick up the phone. And maybe we don't talk every day, but we talk enough. And if they called me, I'm dropping everything I'm doing, and vice versa. The other thing too, I've worked for some very great leaders. And one of them was Chris Johnson, and he was an assistant chief with Seminole County, an ops chief. And one of the things he taught me was make decisions and pick your battles. And between him and another gentleman, Lieutenant Randy Smathers at the time, which he retired out as a division chief, both of them guys taught me that as a leader, the people around you, whether they're your superiors or they're reporting to you or they're your peers, they want you to do your part, make a decision. And then there's going to be times when you're going to be carrying the flag or the torch or whatever you want to call it, but you can't carry it every single time. Every once in a while, you got to let things go by. It may not be worth the struggle. and pick your battles on what you're going to be putting your energy in, because if you're only, successful 50% of the time, that's going to kind of make you negative. So pick your battles, get your wins, and no matter how big or small they are, celebrate your wins and come back and get the other ones. You'll get them. Just keep coming back. Secondly, know your people. I think this is the biggest one. I know when I left out of Seminole, I was very honored by the things that were said and what I feel like I was successful in. And one of the biggest ones were with preventing some suicides that happened over there, that were going to happen over there, and people reaching out. And I think one of the reasons why they reached out to me is because, I showed sympathy at times throughout my career with a lot of different people, and, exposed myself with vulnerabilities that, oh, well, you're the chief, or you're the boss, or you're this, and, there could be nothing wrong in your life. Well, no, that's not right. We all put on our pants the same way in the morning. And, I have my own vulnerabilities, and I have my own weaknesses that I'm working on. So it's not always about I'm the best, or I'm the greatest, or I'm this or that. Sure, be a good cheerleader for yourself, but every once in a while they need to see that you bleed too. And, as long as you're not ruining your credibility doing it, and the confidence that they have in you to lead, I think that that's, very important. And lastly, there was a gentleman, his name was Carl Holmes. I think he was out of Atlanta. He was a chief out of Atlanta, one of the first seminars and people I saw as a subject matter expert when I was very young in the fire department. And I'll never forget it. He said, "The rules apply to you." And he was talking to a group of people that were about 2,000 firefighters. And, everybody was like, oh, and then he turned and he looked over to the 100 or so fire chiefs that were sitting there and said, "I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to the 2,000 that are sitting out there. The rules apply to you. So there can't be a bunch of second standards and hey, I'm going to ad hoc a policy today because it makes my life easier." You can't do that. Firefighters want predictability. I think people in general want predictability. They say they want consistency, but I don't think anybody wants consistency. I want to be prepared for my. I want to be challenged on my own merits. I want somebody to say, "Hey, you're in this situation. This is what you've done. This is what's going on, bad or good," and I want them to evaluate me for me. So I don't necessarily want a whole lot of consistency when it comes, especially if somebody's going to be giving me some discipline. I want a favor. I want something, right? But when it comes to predictability, they want to know what it looks like tomorrow. They want to know what it looks like this weekend. And if you keep doing ad hoc stuff, it just, that's the stuff that tears you down.
I love it, Mike. You spoke about integrity, definitely being a great leader as a compassionate, empathetic, and sympathetic leader, because know your people. That's really what develops their own leadership and the empathy and the empowerment to get those folks to be vulnerable and to talk about their courageous suicidal thoughts or ideation. So you manifest some great leadership, seasoned leader. We can tell you grew up in this so many years. So what is the most memorable leadership aha moment you would love to share with the audience today?
I've had a lot of different things that I've kind of said, oh, this was something, but I took a class on high-rise firefighting at one time, and a guy named Dave McGrail was teaching it, and he did a lot of research on firefighters. That there was a firefighter fatality, and he did research with the firefighters' partners or the crews that they were working the scene and so forth. But also he did a lot of research on firefighters who had a very, very near miss, like they were going to be a fatality statistics and somehow they got out. And what it came down to, he made it very simple, and I love very simple things, good habits. And it came down, that's how he presented it. And then so when I was teaching at the standards class for 20 years, and I think I've probably been on for 10 years when I learned that, I started using that same thing. And it was an aha moment then, but it really became an aha moment when I was in Texas on the USAR team. I was a task force leader, and we had a guy that got injured, and it was only a very small little injury on his leg. But we were in some nasty biological stuff, as you could imagine, with floods and, septic tanks and all these nasty things that happen when, water's standing around. And he got this very, very small cut on his leg, and they were in what they call a dry suit. So he's not even supposed to be exposed to it, but it got cut, and the water was allowed to come in. And when they got back, they knew that they needed to report it to me because I go over a couple of good habits before we go out the door that, hey, listen, these are no nonsense rules. Okay. So we can stretch the limits, and, we can be the A team and, really get out there and chew on some raw meat. But at the same time, these are the no nonsense rules. I want to know when we have injuries and so forth. And thank God we did that. And thank God they did report it, because within a 24, 36-hour period, next thing you know, he's being flown out to a Texas hospital. He almost lost his leg, almost lost his life. And it came down to something so simple, was less than a dime size cut. But if we didn't have the notification, we didn't have the right people start treating him, we didn't, we weren't on guard for what could be, we could have lost somebody. And I thought to myself, in the middle of it, it's just, you're doing your work, right? You're just doing your work. But then when I got back and I got to, rehab myself for, a 10-day deployment, I was like, that really was, I'm glad I was taught that. I was taught it in my day-to-day work much earlier than that, but it was so easy for me to just continue that throughout my career when I heard about it. So simple, good habits. Just have good habits. What a leadership term that is. Just good habits. Do your job, but do it right, and be on top of your game, and don't slip up, because it might be you that answers for it.
Those foundational things that just build the core of what we are, good habits that allow us to help others, and that man, thankfully did make it. But at any time that could have changed, right? That could have been a huge challenge, and it was a huge challenge trying to make it through. But his family and all those that loved him, there's a lot of things that happen when you don't execute good habits and don't use those foundational trainings to help you out. Now, talking about times of change, times of challenges, we've had so many in the last 3 years. We continue to have, with this hurricane that came through. So what strategies and things you put into place for those moments of change and challenge?
So it's funny you asked that. I just submitted and got the draft back. I'm writing an article for the Florida Fire Chiefs Fire Service magazine, and it's on that very thing. It's been a very long time. I think he wrote the stuff back in '65. A guy named Tuckman on group dynamics. And it's one of those things to where people, they might discount it because it was from 1965. What would this guy know, and how could it be applied now? But it is so true, and it resonates every single time. You put two or more people together, you're going to go through group dynamics. And it's real simple: forming, storming, norming, performing. You're going to go through that. You move one person out and put another person in, you're going to go through it. You add a person to it, you're going to go through it. You take that team that's been working the same way, like when I walked in here, the team is working one way, and now all of a sudden, as a new fire chief, of course, I'm going to have some different directions or different interests or different priorities. So it's going to go through that. The key is that if your personnel know what that looks like, and they know that, hey, these are the natural progressions to get to a performing stage, a synergy stage, you're really gelling as a team. And everybody's aware that the stages that you're going to go through, and some of those are very important to the leader, like forming. I'm a big person. You hear about coaching and mentoring all the time, and I can't discount that one bit. Coaching, a team or mentoring a person, there's no argument about any of that. But sponsorship, and true sponsorship from the leader of actually selecting somebody, that is so critically important. And in the article, it even outlines that I think that's why we have a lot of problem with diversity, equity, inclusion. Diversity is about counting people, it's about the numbers. Inclusion is about making people count. And that's what people want. They want to be they want to count in what they're doing. They want to put things forward. They want to contribute to the overall cause. And then at the end of the day, the equity part, they want to be rewarded fairly. And, whether it's time off, it's salaries, it's going to class, whatever, you got to make sure that whatever the person's putting in, they're able to, say that, hey, I've got an equal balance here. And it goes right back to our work-life balance that we were talking about earlier. The other thing too is that, I was kind of dinking around with emotional intelligence, 10 years ago, before it was even cool. Well, you just heard about it in the fire service about 5 years ago. And now it's almost part of most every leadership discussion you have. I followed a guy named Travis Bradbury, who I believe is very, very, he doesn't put anything out there about the fire service or anything specific, but when I'm reading it, it really resonates with me in the fire department that this stuff directly applies on how he puts it out there. And, going through the surveys that you can do on yourself and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's really about you understanding you and how you either, make people happy or get things to move forward, or you make people not happy and things kind of bog down, and figuring out how you're making that, what your contribution positively or negatively is. And it's so critical. I'm not very good at emotional intelligence all the time. A matter of fact, some people would say that I'm terrible at it, but I know about it. I want to do better. Sometimes I wear my feelings on my face and my sleeve. I can't change it, but I can know that, hey, my skin's getting red, or I'm feeling myself, starting to swallow hard, and, maybe I got to exit out. Maybe I got to get somebody in. Maybe the next meeting I'll take, I'll be like, we're not talking about that. Whatever it is, you just got to realize that, that might be one of your weaknesses, or if it's your strength, and especially as a leader, you can't have everybody really emotionally intelligent and there's never any kind of, discourse in there, because that's not healthy. That's just groupthink. And that's how the 2 space shuttles fell out of the sky, unfortunately, and cost so many people their lives. It was groupthink, is that, everybody's so emotionally intelligent, nobody wanted to make anybody mad. Well, at the same time, that you don't want a team to be just making each other mad. And lastly, the other one that I have that is just so unique in general is what I learned, and it's kind of odd. I hope I can put it out here in the right way, but if you're going to make a terrorist, social identity theory makes terrorist. But at the same time, social identity theory is a theory that if you're really reading it, it's about how you can get a kid from the Midwest to join some religious, radical group, across the world. How does that happen? And they've got to be missing something in the Midwest. And so it kind of goes through the same thing of diversity, equity, inclusion. And it really focuses on the inclusion. You want to be part of a team. You want to contribute to the team. You want the team to be winners, and you want yourself and the team to be the best winners. And you want to feel like at the end of the day, whatever you're doing it for a righteous cause, for lack of a better term. Now, we may not think that that's a righteous cause, but somehow they've convinced this young individual that it is a righteous cause. So if we took those same dynamics and put them in leadership and made it for a positive cause, sure, we could do the same thing. I want to put the right people on the bus, going back to Tuckman, and I want to know that group dynamics are going to exist, but somewhere in there, I want to make sure that these people know that they're contributing to the overall cause. And as a fire chief, there's nothing more important than that they are all, operating, and, they're all in the same train, whether they're the train car, the train caboose, the engine itself, or the coal. We're all operating to get the train to where it needs to go. And that's public service. And in my field, public service means life. And it's so critically important.
Public service means life indeed. And you spoke about some great strategies. I hear connection and being accepted, like that young gentleman that you mentioned as far as being radicalized. But group dynamics is so important. And I'll even say it goes back even before 65, World War I, Civil War. We talk about group dynamics and team. And you manifest that in the EOC with Hurricane Ian as well. So group dynamics plays a huge part. Great strategies, great memorable aha moments, and some advice. Great meeting this individual whose first podcast was phenomenal. I can't wait to hear many more and that magazine. And folks that want to get a hold of you, Mike, or the City of Lake Mary Fire Department, how do they go about doing so?
Well, the best way to get a hold of me is just give me a phone call. It's 407-585-1480. That's the best way. My email address is mjohansmeyer, which is my last name. I say it that way so you know how to spell it on the email, at lakemaryfl.com. The Lake Mary Fire Department, you could just Google us as well, and we'll pop right up. We are working on some website stuff. We're going through a transition, so don't be scared if it says something like under construction or whatever. That's all happening right now, but within the next 2 weeks or so, it should be. It's up now, but if it does come down, that's what's going on in the background. We got a consultant in here kind of working through it.
Well, great, folks. We're going to have that as part of the video and show notes for you to be able to get a hold of the fire chief. And thank you so much, Mike, for the time that you've given us, the blessing of being the first podcast, the Leadership Void for you. Folks, we're going to be looking into greater things out of the Lake Mary Fire Station and the company and all the folks that are involved in life, right? That's the element there that you work on. And if you want to get a hold of the Leadership Void podcast, the leadershipvoid@gmail.com is where you'll send that information or request, anything you would like to see as far as leadership and discussions, or a speaker that you would like to be a guest on the show. Just send it our way and we'll look at that. We also have Radio Check, which is the 1st and the 15th of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's where we open up the live session on LinkedIn to allow veterans, first responders, families to come on and have an area where they can actually get into a dialogue and get some of that help that we may have covered earlier, that they don't feel alone and have somebody. So please join us on those lives on the 1st and the 15th. And next week, we'll have another dynamic leader doing great things in and for our community. But today is Mike, Lake Mary Fire, and all the great things they're doing over there.
Thank you so much, Vince and Enrique. I appreciate the opportunity to do this, and it's been a real joy. I look forward to future opportunities.